This is a Merrick Studios podcast. On this episode of Working Title.
Not only is this like an opportunity I'm giving for you to make money, but I'm also inviting you to, be a co-producer in this movie. Maybe you don't give them that technical title, but if you can kind of frame it like that and flip the paradigm where you're no longer going cap in hand, as you put it, kind of begging people for money, but rather you're kind of giving them out of the gracious goodness of your heart, this amazing opportunity. That's the paradigm you want to be in.
I'm Bun B. I'm a host and a co-owner at Merrick Studios, and we just took things to the next level. Merrick Studios Plus is live, so tap in at wearemerrickstudios.com, get 65% off, and don't just listen, be a part of the show.
Every movie starts the same way, an idea, words on a page, a maybe. Most of them never make it any further. I'm Mark Elias, writer, producer, actor, director, and this is Working Title from Paper to Screen. Welcome back to the show. This season, we're following the real-time journey of developing and producing an independent film from blank page to production. Last episode, we talked about what happens after a first draft, how to evaluate it, and work through notes. But eventually, you hit a turning point where the writing ends and the strategy begins. The script exists. The notes are addressed. Now the question is, how do you actually get it made? Traditionally, that means chasing studios, pitching investors, giving up control, or just waiting. But there's another path, one that's become a lot more real in recent years: crowdfunding. And not donation and begging like Kickstarter with perks and t-shirts and keychains. We're talking about equity crowdfunding, where people don't just support the project, they invest in it, they own a piece of it, which means this isn't just about raising money, it's about building an audience and creating real momentum before the film even exists. So how does that actually work? How do you go from a finished script to a fully funded film using a crowd? And more importantly, how do you do it well? And to help us answer that, I wanted to bring in someone who's seen this work up close across hundreds of campaigns. He's pretty much the master, the maestro, the magician, but we'll call him Jonny Price, president of Wefunder. Thank you for being on here today, Jonny.
You got it, man. I think I prefer magician, though. Let's go with that.
All right, magician Jonny. For anyone who's new to this, what's the real difference between something like Kickstarter and raising on Wefunder?
Yeah, the big difference, as you alluded to, is that with Wefunder, it's an investment, right? So with Kickstarter, you give perks. It's kind of almost akin to a donation. But yeah, maybe you get your name in the credits or you get a t-shirt or what have you. With Wefunder, you're offering people a chance to invest in the movie or the restaurant or the bar or the tech startup or the soccer team. Wefunder is a platform that allows any company to raise money. But obviously here we're talking about movies. So you go to, whether it be your friends and family, whether it be kind of professional connections or, kind of LinkedIn connections, or whether you're kind of marketing to the Wefunder user base or, on social media or wherever you want to market it. And you're inviting people to invest in the movie. And so if the movie does well and you make a return, then the investors make a return. And what you find is that when you offer people a chance to make money by investing in your movie, they are much more willing to invest larger sums. So the average investment on Wefunder is about $1,000. I believe the average kind of donation, if you want to call it that, on Kickstarter is more like $80. And also the amount of money that you can raise in aggregate tends to be a lot harder. So I believe the average campaign on Kickstarter is $25K. On Wefunder, it's about $400K. So yeah, that's the big difference.
Okay. And at a high level, who in your estimation does Wefunder really work well for? And then also alternately, who tends to struggle?
Yeah, so I would say the platform works best for producers or founders is usually the word that we use, because usually we're talking about kind of a broader swathe of entrepreneurs than kind of movie producers. But let's say producers here, producers who can raise money. Raising money is hard, right? As you probably know, as anyone who's made a movie will know. If you're, Steven Spielberg, okay, by now you probably don't have a hard time raising money. But kind of early stage kind of producers, they're gonna often struggle to raise money. Wefunder, I would say, doesn't make it easy it's definitely not something where let's, write a nice Wefunder page, tell the story of the movie, kind of articulate how investors are going to make money, put it up on the website, and then we just sit back and watch the money roll in. Definitely does not work that way. You got to hustle. You got to put yourself out there. You've got to be okay to ask a bunch of people to invest. And so the kind of producers that are able to successfully raise a lot of money in Wefunder are folks that maybe they have a network of people that might be interested in investing. They are good at telling the story and pitching investors, and they're willing to just relentlessly put themselves out there. And to some extent, it's a numbers game, right? Where, obviously you can have a higher or lower conversion rate. But by conversion rate, I mean, okay, you pitch 100 people on investing in your movie, how many are going to invest, right? And so you can try to get that conversion rate up by making a beautiful page, or it's an incredible story, or the kind of teaser or trailer looks amazing. So you can try to get that conversion rate up. But at the end of the day, it is a numbers game where if you pitch 100 people, even if half of them invest, which will be insanely high, that's 50 investors. Whereas if you pitch 2,000 people with the same conversion rate, now you've got 1,000 investors. So it does really kind of take putting yourself out there, hustling. Like if I was running a Wefunder raise, I would try to make a spreadsheet with like 500 people in it. And I would personally reach out to those 500 people to try to pitch them on investing in my company. It is kind of, it takes a lot of effort. And so the producers that do well are the ones that, know a lot of people, are good at pitching, and are willing to kind of put that time in to get the rewards.
Yeah, and that kind of touches on my next question, which is, I think, what's the biggest misconception where people think, I'll just go on there and put up a page. And like for me, my first two movies were, I raised $50,000 with Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and that was the same thing where people thought, oh, you just put up a page. And it was like, no,
right.
I pretty much spent 12 hours a day messaging people.
Yeah.
So this, I could see this being that same kind of grind and hustle.
Yeah, I think that's a big misconception. And then kind of related, right? One of the biggest things I try to do is to recalibrate expectations on who's going to bring the money, right? And one of the benefits of Wefunder is we have 1 million users. We do put you up there. You get some money from people that are interested in the story you're trying to tell, or just like the idea of investing in movies. And maybe they've invested in 5 movies on Wefunder, they see yours, and now they invest in yours as a 6th. So it's not to say you won't get any money from the Wefunder investor base, but overwhelmingly, almost certainly, most of the dollars is going to come from people that you bring. And so then the kind of benefit of Wefunder for a producer, the primary value proposition for a producer is not like, okay, the Wefunder investor base is going to do all the work from you. It's more like, this is a platform that enables you to raise more money from your own network and your own fundraising and marketing efforts. Because legally, until relatively recently, about 10 years ago, you could only invest in a movie like this if you were what's called an accredited investor. Wefunder's founders actually back in 2012 helped change the law. It was rolled out in 2016. So now if you're raising money on Wefunder, now anyone can invest in your movie, not just accredited investors, but also unaccredited investors, like everyone in the population of the US. And you can also publicly promote it. And most movie producers are good at telling stories, right? And they're good at kind of producing, beautiful content, and they're good at storytelling. So, what Wefunder allows you to do is to kind of use those superpowers to, market not just the movie, but the investment opportunity to invest in the movie. And you can also hoover up a bunch of smaller checks, and you kind of increase your luck surface area by being on the platform. So in those ways, we kind of like to think we make it a little bit easier for producers to raise capital. But yeah, at the end of the day, it is going to be kind of the work that you're doing to push it to your network that's kind of, really driving the dollars here.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's like a really important point too, is that one of the cool things I saw about the Wefunder platform, I don't know if this is a recent invention or recent addition, is that you can direct message other people that are on there. Kind of circumnavigates me having to seek out their unique names on LinkedIn and then try and find a way to email them,
Yeah, for us as a platform, it's kind of tough to strike that balance, right? Because every entrepreneur or every producer raising the platform, they would love it if we gave them, the mobile phone number of like the million users on Wefunder. And, so obviously our investors would not really like that. So we got to try to strike the balance between, okay, how do we help entrepreneurs raise capital and how do we connect them to the right investors without kind of spamming or bugging investors? And that's a pretty tough balance to strike. So one thing, as the example I mentioned earlier of the Wefunder investor who's invested in 5 movies, we do marketing emails where we kind of market your investment opportunity to investors on Wefunder.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And one of the things we try to do is match your company or your movie to investors that we think might be interested in investing in you. Maybe they're in the same city as you. Maybe they've invested in movies before. Maybe they've told us they're interested in investing in movies on the platform. And we use AI to try to match companies with investors that we think might be the most interested in investing in them.
Okay. That's amazing. So let's say we have a finished script and a plan. What needs to be true before somebody hits launch, that big button that sends it out to the world? And you know, what do you, in your estimation?
So there's like a technical answer to that. And then there's a kind of more pragmatic answer, right? So the technical answer is nothing needs to be true. You don't even need a legal entity set up. You can just spin up a Wefunder page and start sharing it with people and, start kind of collecting at least reservations to invest. So technically there's zero barrier to entry. By the time you actually close on funds, there's some more legal paperwork we need to do. It's called a Form C filing that we do with the SEC. It's like kind of serious, right? The Securities Exchange Commission, like we file something with the EDGAR database. It gets a little more, buttoned up before you can close on funds. You certainly need a legal entity by that point. You need financials that are kind of, if you're raising more than $124,000, those financials need to be reviewed by a CPA. So that to close on funds, there's a little bit more work and paperwork we need to do. But to start fundraising, Wefunder, technically anyone could just start a Wefunder page and start sharing with people. That's the technical answer. The pragmatic answer is, generally speaking in fundraising, that is the last thing that you want to do. And going back to your kind of earlier question about misconceptions or things that people get wrong, I would say it's generally bad in fundraising to just like start fundraising, right? Especially if you're kind of then cold pitching potential investors. Generally in fundraising, you kind of want to be in a position where investors are chasing you. And obviously, sometimes that's not always possible. It's definitely a spectrum. Sometimes beggars can't be choosers. But generally speaking, and this goes the same for kind of if you're fundraising for a movie or if you're fundraising for a tech startup, right? If you're out there kind of aggressively like spamming everyone, hey, will you invest? How about now? How about now? Then, optically, it kind of almost smacks of desperation. The kind of signal there is like, you as an investor are helping me out. Where if you can flip the frame to be like, this is a really awesome movie that I'm going to make. It's going to make a bunch of money. So I'm doing you a favor by inviting you and allowing you to invest and make money along with me from investing in this movie. And by the way, making movies is cool. And maybe you get, to come to the premiere if you invest, $25K, or you get to like come and watch a day of shooting on set if you invest $10K, and you get your name in the credits. And, it's very cool. I mean, you probably don't appreciate how cool it is, but for someone like me that doesn't know anything about movies, isn't in movies, it's like, it's really cool. And so it's like, not only is this like an opportunity I'm giving for you to make money, but I'm also inviting you to, be a co-producer in this movie. Maybe you don't give them that technical title, but, if you can kind of frame it like that and flip the paradigm where you're no longer going cap in hand, as you put it, kind of begging people for money, but rather you're kind of giving them out of the gracious goodness of your heart, this amazing opportunity. That's the paradigm you want to be in. And so generally when you kind of kick off a fundraise, the more you've kind of built the momentum ahead of time, the more progress you've made, the better the page looks. And not just like the kind of product that you're selling, which is kind of the investment opportunity in the Wefunder page, but also like the audience that you're building. Like imagine we launched this product recently on Wefunder called Warm Up, where you build a Wefunder page, you explicitly are not fundraising yet, you invite people to follow the page, and it's like, hey, you know, I'm going to be making this movie. Here's the overview, you know, and here's where you can follow along with the journey. You post maybe bi-weekly updates on kind of, you know, cool developments. And the kind of the call to action is basically follow along if you want to stay in the loop on updates, and be notified if we ever launch a community fundraising round in the future. And so then you're kind of building up the audience, you're building up, you know, potential investors' interest, and you're almost trying to flip it where they're now like very interested in these updates. They're staying in the loop. There's that thing, right, that it takes 7 brand impressions before someone, you know, buys a product from a company. So it's kind of that applied to fundraising. So yeah, that's the technical answer. You can kind of launch a Wefunder at any time with 0 barrier to entry. But from a practical purpose, the more prep work you can do ahead of time and the more you can warm up potential investors, then when you do come to launch, you'll have so much of a stronger kind of first impression and launch moment.
What do you think matters most on the campaign page? And then secondly, like, how do you think about setting a realistic funding goal? Like when you're looking at that number.
So yeah, on the first one, on the campaign page is very, very crucial, right? And so you want to kind of really look polished, really look buttoned up, and really, as I was saying before, right, just really make investors want to be a part of this thing, right? And so for a movie, I would guess there's kind of 2 main things. One is like, okay, obviously the story of the movie, or what are you kind of trying to, the story you're trying to tell, one, and obviously really making that incredible. And generally, if you're struggling to tell the story there, it probably makes me question, you know, whether this movie's going to make it, kind of thing.
Right.
But the second big thing is like, how am I going to make money? And that's actually, I think, when I've seen kind of movies and Wefunder and movies that maybe have struggled to raise or kind of fallen short of what they could have done, it's like, okay, well, as a producer and working in the movie industry, you are amazing at kind of the storytelling and the design and the aesthetics. But then it's like, well, if I'm going to invest $5,000 in this movie, then how am I going to make money? And so then it's like, okay, how are you going to distribute this movie? How much is it going to cost to make? When are you going to release it? So when are we going to start getting distributions here? How is that waterfall going to work? Is there kind of a, you know, forward-looking financial projections where you can basically frame it out for me? Okay, if you invest $1,000, this is our plan for how you make money. And the number of movies where I see like, okay, the first thing is the storytelling, they nail it. But then the second thing of like, okay, the economics and how am I as an investor going to make money is just like not really answered, or it's not answered like very emphatically and confidently. So yeah, I would say those 2 things are super important on the page.
I mean, on that topic, like I know for sure I've seen filmmakers that don't know how to do the business side of any of it, or they don't realize the importance of, and this is, I think, a lot of crowdfunding, I've noticed that they don't realize the importance of having some type of actor that has market value on screen in the film that makes the biggest difference in distribution. That's what I've seen is huge. I think the other question was just like, how should we go about thinking about setting a realistic funding goal? You know, I guess it might depend on your budget in one hand, but also like somebody might think, oh, just shoot for the moon. Somebody else is like, well, if we go lower, it's easier. And like, was there one kind of rule that you kind of stick to going, this is the way to do it?
Yeah, and this goes back to what I was saying earlier about you know, trying to fundraise from a position of strength and confidence versus like kind of desperation, right? So let's say you need to raise $1 million to raise the movie, right? So option 1 is like, we launch with a goal of $1 million, and you know, you can kind of gamify this where we have this option on Wefunder where you can have like a black box that obscures the amount raised initially, which I would also highly, highly recommend doing that. So when people first start, they can't see that you've only raised $0 of $1 million, right? Because that's just like a long way towards the goal. So if you kind of raise in private first, raise as much as you can in private, then when you come out of private, imagine if when you come out of private, you've raised 900 grand, right, of the million. Then, boom, the last 100K goes very quickly because there's FOMO, there's scarcity, there's urgency, there's pressure. Those words are really important in fundraising in terms of like investor psychology. But it might be tough for you to raise 900K from like hitting up your network. Most producers would struggle to do that, especially early stage producers. So then what you can do is to do a couple of things. One, imagine like a line chart where, okay, our total goal for the raise is $1 million, but we say we're going to raise 800K from, high net worth individuals outside of Wefunder and only 200K on Wefunder. So now you only need to get to 200K on Wefunder. And now maybe you come out of private with 100K raise or 150K raise. And now you've only got 50 to 100K left in the public phase. And boom, like that will go quickly. Another way of thinking about this, like, if you say our goal is $1 million in scenario A, and then scenario B, you say our goal is 200 grand, and then you run exactly the same campaign, you do exactly the same activities to market to investors, pitch investors, etc., you will get to 200K faster if your goal is 200K. Because again, like investors, like they see, okay, like there's momentum here, this is successful. Versus if you're at 150K raise to 200K, it's like this campaign is going well. This is a success. I want to invest more now. Whereas if you've got 150K of $1 million raised, then it's like, oh, this campaign is like a long way from its goal. I've got a lot of time. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So literally just changing the goal flips it from like, a success to not a success. The other thing just to keep in mind here is if you cross the 200K on Wefunder, you can then increase it to 500K. And then you're increasing the goal from a position of strength, right? And you're saying, this is great. We were delighted by the outpouring of support from our community and our investors. And due to the overwhelming outpouring of demand to invest in our movie, we are now increasing the allocation from 200K to 300K, 500K. So yeah, I think I always say, start with a small goal. You can frame it, at least initially, as this Wefunder goal is a part of our overall larger goal for the fundraise. Mm-hmm. And you're through those kind of almost like hacks, you're again trying to do things to kind of give you the upper hand or to kind of, position this as like, fundraising from a position of strength and confidence and success.
Yeah, I noticed the last film that I did when we did that raise, and it was like, we made it an exciting event to hit our goal, and now we're doing our stretch goal.
Example. Yeah.
And it was like, well, our stretch goal, we kind of really needed that money too, but it was like, we had like an attainable goal, and then it was like the stretch goal is even better, so that was something that we leveraged in that, as well. So that's good it's nice to know that works on every level.
Yeah.
And then, so I think I'm just curious, like on the investor side, how does it actually work when someone decides to invest? They go in, they put their credit card in, the money, does it go through right away, or does it sit in a bank until you hit a certain amount? Or I know every one of the platforms I've researched is different. How does that work?
Yeah, so usually companies will start on Wefunder in what's called testing the waters mode. This is like getting into the legal weeds a little bit. But I mentioned earlier that before you can close on funds through Wefunder, and the SEC rule that we're using to fundraise here is called regulation crowdfunding. So if you Google regulation crowdfunding, you can, or I guess look it up on ChatGPT these days or Claude, you can kind of learn about it. But we use regulation crowdfunding. This is what allows unaccredited investors to invest. This is what allows you to publicly promote the fundraise. And so, but in order to close on funds via regulation crowdfunding, or we call it Reg CF, you need to file some legal paperwork with the SEC. That is called a Form C. But you can start fundraising on Wefunder before you file the Form C in what's called testing the waters.
Right.
That's
Okay.
the SEC definition. So most companies on WeFunder will start in this test in the waters mode. So then investors will invest. They'll go to wefunder.com/yourmovie, and then they'll read it. This looks great. Look at the team bios. Look at the highlights. Look at how I'm going to make money. Sounds great. Okay, I invested $1,000. If they already have a WeFunder account, they can just log into that. Otherwise, they need to create a WeFunder account. It's super quick and easy to do. And then they check out, and they can pay with a credit card, ACH, wire transfer. They can pay with stablecoin crypto if they want, or Google Pay, Apple Pay. There's a bunch of payment methods. If you're in testing the waters, then WeFunder holds the money in an escrow account. And then only when you file the legal paperwork, the Form C, can we then disperse funds to you. If you've already filed the Form C, then we still hold the money in escrow account, and then we do kind of rolling closes or disbursements. So usually every month or so, whatever's come in, we can disperse funds. You don't have to wait till the end of the raise. You can get your first disbursement 21 days after you file the Form C. And then typically we're dispersing funds on a monthly cadence through until the end of the raise.
Okay. And then I guess so. Let's say somebody gets a raise going and it's rolling. The ball's rolling. What would actually move the needle in the phase where you get to the middle or the end of the campaign? Really, let's say it's like cooking and you're in the last 4 weeks of it. Yeah, what actually moves the needle at that point?
Yeah, so hopefully by that point you've got a few investors, a ton of investors, right? And you can raise up to 5 million on WeFunder. So you can raise 5 million from 5,000 people, or even more people. But like I said, the average investment is $1,000. So if you raise 5 million, you might expect to have 5,000 investors. And if then by the end of the campaign, hopefully you've got a bunch of investors. If they are investors in the movie, they want the movie to do well, right? That's one of the coolest things about this way of raising money is you're recruiting an army of people who are financially invested in the movie's success. And so they should want to help you. And so, then, okay, tell them how they can help. And if it's the last few weeks of the WeFunder raise, then probably the best thing they can do to help you is to tell other people about this opportunity to invest in the movie. So basically 2 ways they can do that. One, they can kind of tell people individually. So maybe I reach out to 5 friends who I think might be interested in investing in this. 5 of my kind of wealthiest friends who are into movies and would, like me, think it was cool to invest in a movie. And so you're asking your investors, hey, please share this with, other people that you think might be interested in investing. And then you can also even say, and if they are interested in investing in potentially a larger amount, 5K plus, 10K plus, wherever you want to draw the line, feel free to connect them to me. I'd be happy to chat with them either in person if they're in the same city, or on a call, a Zoom call or whatever. And so then you can hopefully kind of close them. So that's kind of the more personalized approach. So if you could get your 200 investors to personally share the investment opportunity with 5 friends, that's good kind of top of funnel outreach. And then the second thing will be to share on social, right? Or in a kind of a more mass way.
And we'll be right back.
Welcome to Merrick Studios, where stories take the mic and culture comes alive.
We're not just a network, we're family, bringing you smart, soulful, unfiltered conversations.
And this season, we're bringing the heat with our biggest lineup yet. Whatever you're into, music, sports, business, we got you covered.
Merrick Studios, where the conversation starts and keeps going.
Check out our full lineup, including Unglossy with Bun B, Jeffrey Sledge, and myself, Tom Frank. Now streaming at wearemerrickstudios.com.
Master the art of lyricism with Pendulum Mink, the first school for rap. Learn elite techniques through immersive lessons, real-world exercises, and guidance from hip-hop icons. This is where MCs sharpen their skills and glow boldly on the mic. Ready to level up? Visit pendulummink.com and start your journey today.
And now, back to the show.
So maybe you write an awesome post, whether it's Instagram or LinkedIn or whatever the medium of choice is, and then you kind of reach out to your investors and say, hey, last week of the campaign, we wrote this post to kind of celebrate the success and, give a last opportunity for anyone else to come in if they want to participate. would love it if you could repost this. So that's certainly one tactic that I think works really well.
Okay.
I mean, if it were me on the last day of the raise, I would text everyone in my phone like, hey, last chance to invest kind of thing. Probably most of those people I already would have hit up earlier in the raise. But for those that haven't invested yet, last 24 hours, I would text them or send a personalized email to them, last chance to invest. This is all the good stuff that's happened since I last kind of messaged you about this. We're closing soon. Here's a reminder on the perks. And again, trying to fundraise from a position of strength. Like, again, this is kind of, we don't need the money here, but we're just inviting you to participate in it. We think it's going to be really cool. I think you want to be a part of it kind of thing. So yeah, kind of texting people. Oftentimes investors will increase their investment amount. So you could always try to kind of pitch investors on that, especially let's say that you could see on someone's LinkedIn, or maybe you know them and they're like pretty affluent and they invested like $100. You might try to kind of, get them to increase the investment amount. I like the idea of in-person events, especially in this industry. It's like cool to like hear about, I mean, obviously this is what this podcast is about, right? It's cool to like learn about movies or like, learn about how movies are made. Like, I think if you hosted like a fireside chat, either at, some kind of, large lecture theater or kind of, the local entrepreneur center's kind of large, conference room, or at someone's house. Like, I would love to host an event in my house where, I interview you in my living room with like 50 of my close friends about what it's like to make a movie. I think that would be like such a fun event. Yeah, cool. Let's do it.
I don't know where you're located, but I'm coming there this weekend. Well,
okay,
next weekend.
Awesome. Yeah. I'm in Nashville, so I'll see you soon.
I can just bring some vodka. We can have like a big old party.
Let's do it. Okay, it's a date.
So I want to go to Nashville. It's perfect. Okay.
So yeah, like, and that's just one example, but like I personally, if I was running a Wefunder, I would do that. And I'll be like, almost like, I don't know who that's going to be, right? But like, okay, an investor type person or someone with a nice house. Like we've probably, everyone's been to those kind of events, right? Politicians do these all the time, right? It's like almost like a fundraising event for a politician, and like some rich person, like with a nice house, like invites a bunch of their friends around. Yeah. Exactly. So that's another idea. But check out guides.wefunder.com is a really good fundraising guide that we wrote with a bunch of these ideas. But I would say above all, the biggest piece of advice for the coming into land on the campaign is just hustle incredibly hard. Like dedicate your whole last week, like everything, just work so many hours that week on like leaving it all out there on the field. Because, with these things, it really is like you get out what you put in from a kind of effort perspective.
And also I'm actually wondering how we could use a launch of this podcast toward the end of the race to like help push the finish line. Is that how is that? Totally. Is there a possibility in that or?
Yeah, I mean, like content generally is awesome, right? I think content is good, and not just content like, hey, invest in my movie, but like more broad content, like what does it mean to make a movie, or like, what is it kind of, just give me the inside scoop on like the movie industry. It's cool. It's interesting. More so than just let me walk you through my investor pitch deck for the 1,000th time. That it seems a little self-serving. It's a little, I mean, that's good too, but I personally like content that's kind of broader. It goes along with what I was saying earlier about kind of making investing in your movie seem cool, seem like something people just want to be involved with because it's interesting, it's fun, it's, it's cool.
Yeah. And another thing I noticed, and this is just, again, from the experience that I had with the other two, is that when you have a page up and running, it seems like well, this is leading to a question, but I've noticed that like even when you do like a weekly update, even if it's like the least, like the only positive thing you can pull from like a really slow week, it tends to be something that people over time appreciate the consistency. So I guess so like leading that to my question is like, what kinds of updates or signals have you seen actually that drive people to invest, not just create interest or raise awareness, but like really drive them to invest?
Yeah, I think it's kind of the recurring theme of, this interview is things that kind of demonstrate success, which honestly, like in some respects, I kind of don't like framing it this way because I don't know, like I think there's a lot in fundraising generally and startups that is kind of overly performative, and I kind of, in a sense, like am reluctant to kind of, succumb to those games. But at the end of the day, I kind of think you kind of got to, and so any update that just is awesome, right? And it's like makes me think, oh wow, like that's cool. Like, yeah, okay, I can see. We signed this actor, we kind of shot this clip. I don't know, I connected with this like very famous producer and they gave me some great advice, or we had this kind of news coverage, or, we signed this distribution deal. I don't know. I'm kind of making these like examples up, but the point is just anything that like if someone saw that update, they would be like, oh, this is something I want to be a part of. I don't personally like that. Hey, we raised 100 grand, or we raised 105 grand. We raised 110 grand. I mean, obviously to some extent celebrating milestones is good, but for me, like, okay, we raised another 10 grand. That's not like, if it's like we just had someone invest 250K in our movie, and they have like an incredible track record of investing in movies, and they invested in all these other cool movies, then it's like, oh, okay, wow, like they invested 250K. That's interesting. Like, like why did they invest that's so anything that makes you look successful, awesome, like something that I as a potential investor want to be a part of.
That's so good. Such good information. I think another thing that for me, and this is, I think I'm different from what a traditional quote unquote movie producer is, or the idea of one, is that they tend to say whatever it is to get from point A to point B. I'm a person that will get on a Zoom or with an investor, and I'm like brutally honest, because that's just like, I'm just more of like, this is how it is. It's risky, but like, these are the things we're doing to like pad, stack the deck in our favor, right? So I mean, I'm just, for me, I'm a fan of being transparent and being honest, because in the long run, like I have there's a scope of like, I want to do more than one movie and I want to build strong relationships. How do you talk about risk in a way that's honest, but it's still compelling? Because I always want to be completely, truthful about where I'm at, where we're going, what the situation is.
Great question. And also, this kind of maybe almost seems like it kind of contradicts what I've been saying. But I would flag the risk very, very clearly. I'm English, right? So I generally don't like the kind of braggadocio. In my mind, like Americans are a little bit more like, brash and like, yeah, we're going to do this. And English people are a little bit more, circumspect and kind of, oh, I couldn't possibly kind of thing. So I am English. So if I was running a Wefunder, if I was fundraising for a movie, I would very emphatically flag, like, this is super risky. Like, a lot of movies don't make money, don't invest more than you can afford to lose. I think I would do that in a way that was almost like increasing the chance that person invests. Because for me, like, at least if I'm buying something from someone, if I think someone's like aggressively selling me, it's a massive turnoff.
Right.
Whereas if someone is like flagging the risk, like, here's why you wouldn't want to do that, it's like, oh, okay, that's actually building my confidence that you're not just like, kind of selling me a bill of goods. So yeah, I would always kind of be very transparent in flagging the risks.
Yeah. I grew up in the Northeast, and I'm the same way. Like, the second you smell something, you're just like, I would rather somebody just tell me, and then I can decide on my own.
Yeah. And we try to do that with Wefunder. Like on my team, his jobs is talking to producers, talking to founders about if they should do WeFunder, why they should do WeFunder. I could easily sit here and say WeFunder is going to bring all the money, right?
Right.
But we try to set like really kind of conservative expectations. Like, no, we're not going to bring all the money. You're going to have to do the work. This is going to be hard. We try not to oversell like the benefits of fundraising on WeFunder, because otherwise you come into it with just the wrong expectations, and then you're going to be disappointed. Well, that doesn't work out well for either of us.
Sure. And so I'm rolling in. Let's say like we're rolling into a WeFunder thing here. We're getting ready to launch. What we kind of touched on this a little bit with gaining momentum, but is there one thing you'd say, hey, you've got 7 days to this thing to launch? Like, what is the most important thing? Is it just, what is,
Well, I think it depends on what you mean by launch, right? I think that's an interesting kind of thing to just touch on for a second. So, most people, when they think about launch, it's like, okay, we're blasting it out on social media. Hey, everybody, we're live investing on WeFunder, right? We're blasting it out to the WeFunder investor base. Hey, everyone on WeFunder, 1 million people on WeFunder, check out our movie. You can invest, right? So I think and I think this goes for Kickstarter raises as well, like there's a lot of work that goes in before that launch, right? And so the first thing, making a page that you're proud of. Like I mentioned, sometimes now producers would launch a warm-up on WeFunder where they make a page, have people follow the page. They're writing kind of updates and kind of, building momentum and, investor interest and explicitly not fundraising. We're not fundraising, which in some respects is like the best sales pitch ever, right? And then it's like, oh, can I invest? No, we're not fundraising. It's like, oh, that makes me want to invest more. And then, okay, now we turn it on. Now we're fundraising. Okay, you've already built up the interest. But, even when then you are coming to fundraise, then the last thing you want to do is start with like the Facebook post, right? Or start with like the kind of, let's say you do have an email list, start with that kind of email everyone on your email list, or like get in front of the WeFunder investors, right? You want to start with personalized outreach. You want to start with kind of closing investors one by one. Like I mentioned earlier, have a spreadsheet of 500 people on it. And I would stack rank that. For me, I would honestly stack rank that, not even by how much I think they would invest, but like the probability that they would invest. So my mom and dad, 100% of probability they invest, right? My sister, right? And her husband and, my wife and her mom and dad and like her, 2 brothers and sister and their 2 wives. And now I'm at like 12 investors with like 100% from like sending 12 text messages. So now on day one, I have like, not even day one, like, that's 30 minutes, not even that, it's 10 minutes to send 12 text messages and have like 12 investors, right?
Right.
And then, okay, it's like, my best buddy from high school, right? And the people that I've like worked with for the last decade. And, it's almost like a descending kind of stack rank. And if you're fundraising kind of normally, it's like, okay, I don't know if I want to, can you invest like 5K? I don't know. Like, do I even want to like kind of pressurize you to invest 5K? I don't know. But on WeFunder, the minimum is $100. So, you're going to have a lot of people that just want to support you with $100, right? To kind of be a part of the project, the movie. So that is really where I would start. Every company is different. Every movie, every producer is different. So like Substack, if you know the newsletter platform, they raised $5 million on WeFunder in 24 hours. They just sent one email to their user base and boom, they raised 5 million oversubscribed in 24 hours from 8,000 people. So, if you have a huge audience like that, you can skip the personalized outreach phase and just go straight to the social media blast, right? But
I need to make friends with Substack, apparently.
Yeah. But like for most producers, okay, you're not going to have that huge audience that's just going to like be explosive. So for you then, okay, start with the personalized outreach in that private pre-launch phase, and then raise as much as possible in private and only then publicly launch. And you might even, like you said, oh, we're going to launch in 7 days. It's like, if you haven't raised that much money, then don't publicly launch yet. And just like keep raising in private, keep kind of talking to investors a little bit more privately, so that then when you do publicly launch, again, going back to what we've been saying, you do so from a position of strength. It's a really good first impression. And that's the same thing with the Wefunder investor base. Like, we have 1 million people we'll put you in front of. You got one chance to make a first impression of them. Every producer on Wefunder is always like, how quickly can I get in front of the Wefunder audience? How quickly can I, can you push me out in your email? And it's like, well, technically, when you get to 50K, we can do that. But if you, again, two scenarios. Scenario A, you get in front of 1 million people and you've raised 50K from 12 people. And then scenario B, you get in front of the same 1 million people and you've raised $312,000 from 279 people. Which do you think will have the higher conversion rate on that email? So you have one chance to send that email to 1 million people.
Yeah.
We always recommend, okay, wait as long as you can before you get in front of 1 million Wefunder investors who've never heard of you before, never heard of your movie before, because literally, like, the social proof and the dollars raised and the number of investors that they see when they land on your page will be a big driver of a difference in conversion rate from, like, okay, them landing on the page to them kind of investing in the movie or following it.
Okay. One other quick question I think maybe that just kind of came to me is, like, let's say I've tapped out my network. Let's say that I've hit up everybody. My spreadsheet of 25,000 people has been gone through once or twice over. What would be the next best way to open up my network to another group of people?
So I would highlight kind of 3 things. One, just going back to what we said earlier, virality. Hopefully, if you've invited 25,000 people to invest, like, a lot of them have invested.
Right.
And so now you can go back to those people that invested and, again, try to get them to invite people in their network or share on social or whatever it is, right? So that would be one. The second would be kind of, mass marketing. So which could be like organic content that you're posting on social media, or, like, content like this. Social media is always kind of, a good channel. It could be, press, or, you get featured in some kind of, publication, or like local press, or something like that. And then the third thing would be maybe more personalized outreach. So, okay, I don't know where you find those kind of rich people that like investing in movies. It's maybe a little easier for me to kind of understand how you do that for tech startups, where I have a little more familiarity.
Right.
But, like, okay, maybe are there other kind of producers that and they raise money from people, and they would either, share who they raise money with, or maybe even make an intro for you to those investors. Maybe you can look at people who made investments in other Wefunder movies and try to reach out to them via a LinkedIn DM, or by kind of, guessing at their email. Obviously, cold outreach to kind of individual people is pretty labor intensive, and it's pretty grueling, and probably most people are not going to respond or not be interested in investing. But if you can try to be targeted, of, like, often I think some of the companies that do the best on Wefunder, whether movies or other types of companies, are kind of cause related, right? So if your movie is about a certain kind of theme, or almost like a purpose, then, okay, who are the people? Are there kind of groups of people, or are there kind of investors who rich people who've kind of, made a bunch of angel investments, who are clearly interested in that cause or that purpose? Or, like, sometimes there'll be, I've spoken to producers who are making a movie in this, like, small town in North Carolina. Well, okay, like, hit up the kind of rich people in that town, and you can figure out who those people are on LinkedIn, and try to reach out. Hey, I'm making a movie. We're going to be shooting in your small town. Like, wondered if you'd be interested in investing. So that's kind of like the third approach, which is kind of, outreach to kind of, individual people who, are pretty affluent and you think might have a high propensity to invest in your movie. Obviously, there's a kind of unlimited number of those people, so that can be I would say that would be probably pretty low down on my list. I agree with you. Like, the first priority is people you have existing relationships with.
Right.
25,000 people in the spreadsheet. That's a really high number, by the way. But that is definitely the place to start. I talk about kind of concentric circles. So when you start fundraising Wefunder, kind of reach out to your kind of inner circle. Like I mentioned, literally 12 immediate family members. Boom, 100% conversion. And then through the campaign, you're kind of expanding the concentric circles. And eventually, if you've exhausted your own network, then, okay, you're reaching out to people that have never heard of you before, the outermost kind of concentric circles. That's obviously kind of tough, and it's harder, both, I think emotionally it's kind of harder to do, but also it generally will have a lower conversion rate. But the reason you start with the inner concentric circles is by the time you get to the people that are kind of cold and they don't know you or the movie, they can at least see the social proof that comes from, okay, we've raised a bunch of money from a bunch of investors. So those cold people are maybe a little more likely to invest just because of the momentum that you've built up on the page by then.
Wow. Okay. So then let's say we go through this and you do the campaign, you put it out there, everything. And when this comes together, when it works, what does success actually look like beyond just hitting the number?
Yeah, I think it's kind of two things, right? One, obviously hitting the number and hitting the number quickly and oversubscribing, blah, 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 right? The second thing is just, I would say, use the word community. Like, we call it a community round. We don't actually like the term investment crowdfunding. One, because crowdfunding makes people think of Kickstarter. And two, because it kind of sounds a little impersonal. We like the term community round, like you're raising money from your community. And that word is very central to our whole kind of, ethos and raison d'etre at Wefunder. We made spreadsheets, We make a lot of spreadsheets too, but we made sweatshirts that just have the word community on them. So that if there's one word for me that was what Wefunder is about, it's community. And so, success is one, we're raising the money quickly, confidently, but also two, we're building community around this project or this movie or this company. And, the 1,000 investors that we have, it's not a financial transaction, but they feel part of the team. And so now they're going to help us to win and help us get the word out. Legion M is a movie studio that was one of the first companies to raise on Wefunder when the laws went into effect in 2016. And they've raised tens of millions of dollars from, I think, probably like 100,000 or so investors at this point. And now, every time they make a new movie, they have this huge army of investors. They get investors, hey, want to invest in the new movie? Boom, funded. And then when they're kind of, releasing the movie, then they can tell all the investors, go watch the movie on opening weekend. Tell all your friends to go watch the movie. And they've really leaned into this concept of like an investor army, an investor community. And I think it's like, that is the kind of apogee about the more. I wrote this blog post on my Substack. We should put community back into community rounds or something along those lines. I can't remember the title. But the idea was, the more you can have the fundraising process, and not just while you're fundraising, but also after you're fundraising, like can keep investors in the loop, like, have in-person events with them or whatever it is, so that you're kind of continuing to build the relationship with investors, build the community. And you mentioned earlier, it's a great point, like you want to make other movies as well, right? And even if, this movie doesn't work out financially, if you have given updates to investors, kept them in the loop, like invited them to participate, maybe ask them for feedback on, whatever it is, encourage them to go see the movie, build the relationship with them, then you can still lose all of their money on this investment and go back to them and they will still invest in the next one. Obviously, they'll be more likely to invest in the next one if you also make them a bunch of money on this one.
We're going to plan that it makes money because
hopefully
that's
we do both. But I think as long as you can, because again, as long as you framed it up front, hey, investing in movies is super risky. So if you framed it as risky up front, then even if it doesn't work out financially, there's a way that you can kind of maintain relationships with investors by kind of having them feel like you value them, you appreciate them, even if things don't work out, you're communicating to them. and you're kind of trying to build that sense of community.
That's something really big I noticed before, that I'm like, if something goes bad, obviously it's embarrassing because you never want things to go bad, but the reality is there's always, for any founder, not even in movies, nothing ever goes according to plan all the time.
100%.
Being transparent and saying, and not going to them with, I found that when I'm being transparent, I'm not going to them with problems. I'm going to them with like, hey, this thing happened. Here's the pivot. They, at least, it's like, might not be thrilled, but it's like they see that there's a path and it's not just getting dumped down the drain. So
right.
That's really important. Jonny, thank you so much for being here, man. I know it's taken up a bit of your time, but this is amazing. I really appreciate it. Thanks for jumping on.
You got it. This was really fun. Great conversation. I hope a bunch of movie producers will see this and, get value out of it. If you want to raise on Wefunder, we'd love to talk with you. But if you think it's going to be easy, you're probably going to be disappointed. It was a really fun conversation. Great questions. And I'll see you next weekend at my house for the fireside chat, right?
I can't wait. I'm gonna wear something really fun to make people say he's that guy.
Love it.
So here we are. We've got a script, we've got a plan, and now we've got a path to actually funding this thing. But as Jonny made clear, this isn't about throwing up a page and hoping people show up. This is about building momentum before we ever launch, building an audience before we ask for investment, treating this like a campaign, not just a raise. Jonny, again, really appreciate you coming on and breaking this down. This is incredibly helpful. So next week, we start doing the work. This week, today we start doing the work. Pre-launch outreach, building the crowd that can actually make this real, because at this point, this movie isn't getting made without them. So building the crowd and building the audience, and we will see you all next episode, running, looking for money and building the audience. Thank you.
Thanks, man. Bye.
This is Working Title from Paper to Screen.